Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another webinar. My name is Ryan, and it's my pleasure to be with you today. We're going to be talking about teaching online today. So, as usual, please let me know where you're from, where you're watching from today. Um, so, something about me, I've been teaching and managing in English for about 20 years now. I've taught quite a lot online. I've had good experience with teaching online for myself and for other companies. So hopefully I'll pass on some of my experiences and advice to you today. So who have we got? We've got um, people from South Africa, from California. That's very nice. From Ireland, from the USA. That's fantastic. And from France. Absolutely fantastic. New Zealand, Brazil. Wow, this is great. I always enjoy seeing um, you guys from all around the world, and it's great to join you today. Okay, let's jump in straight away, shall we? So we're going to be talking about teaching online, and let me know in the comments if you've ever taught online. By the way, so just some things about today. Some of the things that we're going to be covering. So what could we say about teaching online? The rise of teaching English as a foreign language is absolutely no secret to anyone. More and more people are realizing that they can travel the world the way they want to, enjoying their own lifestyle while supporting themselves. The traditional TEFL route is to find a job as a teacher in a foreign country, work for a year or two there, and then move on to your next destination. But many more people now are taking a different option. Is that you can teach online, you can work in many different countries, uh, in organizations, I should say, in different countries. But you yourself you can be anywhere. You can spend a month here, a month there, and you can carry on with your lifestyle. So today we're going to be talking about some of these ideas, and we're going to be covering these things. So why would anyone want to teach English online? We'll talk about some methodology and about how to teach online as well, which platforms you can use and which technology you might need. We'll talk about a few things to think about, to consider before you start teaching online. We'll talk about some tips and some advice, and at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So if you've got any questions, try to save them until the end, and I'm happy to answer that for you. Okay, so a few people are saying, for example, Kerry, I currently teach online, which allows me to work from home on our farm. Okay, that sounds great. So let's talk about why teach online. So, of course, there is a dramatic increase in online teaching in online English language learning. Just this year, the market has been seeing a massive increase of over 15%. And that's just month to month. So it's growing rapidly. And English language is worth almost 9 billion euros, probably a bit more than that now, because this figure was from 2021. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's over 10 billion euros by now. So it's a massive, massive market. There's plenty of room for everybody. So we have to take, obviously, COVID into consideration in the last few years, which is why there's been a massive increase in online teaching. The great thing about teaching online is it's very flexible for living and working. You can take control to where and when you want to work. You can work in your own country. You can work abroad. You can be traveling around and be a digital nomad. So the options are really good. And many people are deciding to be a digital nomad these days. There are few restrictions on where you can live. Um, Obviously, you need to think about a few things, and we'll get into that a bit later. But if you want to work from home, um, you can go to where your friends and family are, for example. If you want to take some time out and just have a change of scenery, you can do that as well. You can, the world is your oyster, basically. You can decide when and where you want to work as well. So, how to teach English online? Well, there are two basic models. The first is to work for a company. You can sign up with one of the many hundreds of different companies that are out there offering work for online teaching, and you'll simply wait for students to arrive that the company arranges for you. You don't have to get involved with the marketing and so on. You'll be employed as a teacher for these companies. Um, you'll need to make sure that there are any mm, entry requirements for the company, for example, in terms of qualifications. You might need to do a demo lesson, for example. You might need to provide a video demo of your teaching before you join the company. Um, but there are many advantages of working for a company. As I mentioned, they will find the students for you. Their company will also keep track of your schedule and book lessons for you. They'll make a timetable. Um, they'll organise the lessons for you. You just have to make sure that you're available for those times. Um, it's courses. It's more kind of a regular routine. You can get into a habit and get into a timetable. Companies will often give you feedback from the students, um, and the better your feedback, the more bookings that you will get. Quite simply, the more that you become popular, the more students want to join your lessons, and that's how it works sometimes with these online companies. There may be bonuses involved in this as well. So do your research, find out some more about these companies, see what the hourly rate is. For teaching online, it's going to be a little bit lower than teaching face to face initially, um, but it's a good place to start once you build up your experience, your confidence on camera. Um, you can practice your teaching if you're just starting out. But yeah, it's a great way to start. The bonuses might depend, for example, on how punctual you are for your lessons, your positive feedback from students. So the second option is to go it alone, go out there and be an independent teacher. So this is great. Obviously, the increased freedom that you get from being your own boss. Um, you don't have to sign up to any company, but you'll have to do the marketing yourself. Remember, you'll have to get your own students. So this might involve um, creating a website and then linking that to your social media accounts, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and so on. And you really need to kind of feed that monster of social media to make sure that you've got enough students coming through the pipeline. Um, so you need to put yourself out there much more, and it takes a lot of energy. You need to kind of keep that going. If there's a pause, you might find that your students will drop off. So you need to keep that going almost every day. Um, so you need to make sure that potential students know where to find you. Okay. So the other option is also, instead of your own platform and your own website and so on, you can jump onto other platforms that will list you. There's lots of competition out there, but this is a kind of halfway house between working for a company and being independent, because you've got the benefit of choosing when you want to work and choosing what lessons you want to do. But also you've got the benefit of the platform helping you with the marketing. You still probably have to do your own marketing as well. But again, this is another way for them to kind of keep track of your schedule as well. Usually they earn their money by taking commission on any lessons that you book. So if you don't want to give away a percentage of your earnings, then being an independent teacher and doing your own marketing is the way forward. So also bear in mind, if you're going to go down that route, you could certainly decide how much you want to be paid for your lessons. You can set your value and your schedule. But on the other side of that, of course, there's lots of admin involved. Maybe you'll have to set up a company, you have to set up your tax returns, your invoices, and so on. You have to chase payments, late payments. You'll have to have a late policy, for example. You might find that you need to put a lot of terms and conditions into your website design. So it's really a question of where you want to be. I think if you put the work in the end, it's very rewarding to be your own boss, and you can definitely um, make a good living of that. Or you can do a bit of both. You can supplement your income if you want to be independent, but also work sometimes for a company, or use the many platforms that are out there. And then you can start building your clients one by one, and then you might decide to go 100% independent at some stage. Okay, so a lot to think about there. So here's some more things to think about. Time zones. So keep in mind that if you are teaching in one part of the world and a lot of your students are coming from the other side of the planet, you need to think about the time zones involved. So yeah, you don't want to be waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning to teach your lessons, or you don't want to be teaching too late. You want to kind of think about restricting your students to being in more or less the same time zone that you're in. Other things to think about as well: visas. Although you're working online, um, the visas might be more relaxed, but you'll need to kind of do some research and see how long you can stay in the country, even though you're working online. Um, there's certain visas for digital nomads that are kind of specific for people that are working online. But my advice is to do your research, find out what is possible in your destination country. So, also very important is the cost of living. So, traveling around the world is really great, but of course, some countries are much more expensive than others to live in and work in. Um, you might be earning dollars, for example, or pounds or euros. Um, so it's great if you can do that while you're actually living in a country where the cost of living is much cheaper. You can really leverage that to your advantage. Um, try to make some calculations and see what you can do. Budget yourself and think about what the day-to-day cost of living will be for you to get your basics. So yeah, the ideal situation is that you're earning a decent wage, but you're living somewhere where the cost of living is relatively cheap. Think about your stuff, your luggage. Are you going to be carrying a lot of luggage around with you? Um, are you going to be traveling light, living quite minimally, or do you need to bring certain things with you? Do you need to bring people with you? Do you need to bring family or your partner with you as well? Um, Thinking about that. So think about becoming a packing expert as you travel from country to country, um, and thinking about how you're going to transport yourself as well. You get very good at looking at ways how to get through the customs and passport control really quickly, how to pack really quickly and make the most of what you're bringing to a country. Okay, um, so do have a think about that. Don't forget to pack your equipment as well, and we'll talk about the equipment that you'll need for teaching online a bit later as well. You might need to take your materials as well, maybe some books, um, but you don't need to take your whole classroom with you. So do think about that. Make smart choices, and take the essentials, and you can always get something in your destination country. So very important as well is the connectivity. So wherever you are, make sure that you're going to have a really strong and stable internet connection. Okay, this is really important. Um, if you're working for a company or you're working for yourself, your lessons are really going to suffer if you don't have a really good and fast, strong internet connection. Okay, so you might be living in a hostel or a hotel, for example, or on someone's couch, for example, an Airbnb. Um, but do your homework and make sure that wherever you go, you've got a good internet connection and also power. Make sure you've got access to power, so that you've got enough juice to last through a lesson. Um, think about where you're going to work as well. You'll need to have a nice, quiet working environment without distraction, um, so you won't be disturbed. For example, so this might be in a hotel room. Um, eh, the kind of cliche is that you'll be working on the beach, but believe me, I've tried this before. It's not as easy as it sounds, because usually the beach is very noisy. You kind of make sure that you've got power and so on. So it sounds great. I tried it once just out of curiosity, but I don't think I'll be trying that experiment again, because it's not like how you see people um, pretending that it works on Instagram, that you can work on the beach. I'm afraid life doesn't work that way, but you can try it and tell me how that goes. So make sure you've got a quiet place. Um, so bear in mind, if it's in a busy town, are there going to be roadworks there? Are there going to be constructions around you? It's a good idea to invest in a nice pair of noise cancelling headphones, for example. And also, you need to be comfortable. A nice, comfortable chair, kind of mini office setup that you've got, and your equipment. And we'll go on to talk about equipment very soon. All right. So here's a few tips about choosing some platforms and tools. So of course, we've got things like Google Classroom, Moodle, Canvas, Edmodo. There are so many what we call LMSs, so learning management systems. These are great. Um, and these are designed to help you organize your classes. For example, you can provide your students with materials, and this can organize the courses that you deliver and make for your students. And they can access those materials. Um, if you are managing that yourself, some companies might use that as well as part of their system. So get to know these platforms as well. They're very useful. Um, of course, when it comes to actually delivering your online lessons, we've got Zoom, Skype, Google Meets, and Microsoft Teams. Try a few different ones is my advice, and see which ones work for you. Zoom, of course, is very popular. Lots of people know it as well. Um, Lots of people have accounts already on Zoom and Skype and platforms like that. Um, Great thing about Zoom is the the breakout rooms, the virtual blackboards, and so on. There's lots of great tools there and plugins that you can use. Um, you can share your screen, of course, in many different types of platforms. You can share files as well. Um, you can look at loads of different options there, um, and you can have a lot of fun designing your lessons on them. Also, tools like, for example, Canva, Kahoot, Quizlet, Padlet, and these can really be great ways to make your lessons come alive. Um, you can do quizzes and fun challenges. A great way to manage write small writing tasks, for example, on Padlet. So this is a really great, and a lot of these tools are free. Of course, you can take the option to have a more premium experience with that, um, and these can really uh, be great standby at the end of a lesson or beginning of a lesson. They're great for recycling material and making it a lot of fun for your students and for you as well. Okay, it's very interactive, and you can generate your own materials on them. And also, there's lots of ready-made um, materials and activities and tasks out there already made for things like Kahoot and Quizlet, for example. But have a look what's out there. There's many to choose from. Okay, let's mention something about setting up your own equipment. So if you're planning to teach online, you may need to make sure you have all the right tools and equipment, whether you're working from a home office or you're working from somewhere else in a remote location, for example, in a hotel. You'll need to make sure you've got the basics. So, of course, you need a decent laptop and PC, a decent sized screen, I think. Um, of course, you can use a tablet as well, but I think the larger the tablet, the better experience you're going to have in teaching online. Um, of course, you'll need one with a camera, a built-in camera, or you might want to invest in a really decent webcam. A good webcam can make a lot of difference, especially if you're in an environment where the light is not perfect. Um, if you've got a setup, you can have multiple cameras, for example. You can have a face-to-face camera, or you can have a camera that is directed down at your desk so you can look at materials, you can write things. If you've got um, a pen tablet, you can use that as well on a different camera. So there's lots of options there. Of course, you're going to need a fast internet connection, um, which can handle all of the video as well, and all of the tools that you're going to use. So it's really important. Um, this is a good investment. So shop around, make sure that you've got really fast and reliable internet connection wherever you are. You'll need to have a decent headset, a good quality headset. Um, so I would say that ones with a built-in microphone are really good. Noise cancelling is excellent as well. And this will be a much better experience for you and your students, um, especially you can shut yourself off from any distractions from the outside world while you're teaching. Okay. um, As I mentioned, also comfortable setting. So make sure you're sitting well, your posture is good, you've got a nice comfortable chair, you've got everything at arm's reach for you to use. If you're going to use any materials for your lesson, make sure they're close by. Um, Also, a professional looking background. So if you're working from a home office, you might want to think about a green screen. Um, you you'll need to take into consideration what your students can see behind you. So make this something that's going to look professional. Um, Plain background is really good. Um, but something light, I think, with maybe some plants in the background, some books. You can use a kind of virtual background as well that's suitable, but I think a lot of them can be quite distracting. So I usually go for a very plain background if I can, or also to cut down on the distractions behind, and make sure there's plenty of light as well. You might need to think about um, one or two different light sources for you if you're going to be on camera. Okay. Um, Also, your notes. So you might want to take notes and record the vocabulary and mistakes and errors from your students to make sure you've got that on hand as well. And this will really help you organize your lessons a lot easier. Okay, a couple of other things to think about. So privacy and online safety, very, very important, of course. You know, we want all of our students to be safe online, and we want to be safe as well, of course. So one thing to take into consideration is GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation in certain countries. So this is something that you need to think about if you're delivering any kind of online content, if you're gathering any potential data from your students, addresses and so on, email addresses, you've got a responsibility to treat your students' data carefully, respectfully, and of course very safely and securely. Be mindful about sharing any photos and video online as well. So, as long as personal data, when it's personal data, of course, you know, can be named, things like date of birth, even exam results and so on. And there's plenty of guidance for that. Um, Very, very careful about sharing videos and photos. You should really try to kind of avoid this. Um, I think it's um, it's difficult but important to kind of separate your personal and your professional life online as well. So while you might have social media accounts that help you market your teaching business or your online lessons, you don't want this to kind of overspread into your personal online space. Okay. Um, so just have a think about that. Make sure that your students know that if you do in any way need to record a video, make sure you've got all of permissions up front. Make sure that's all transparent as well. Um, and I think generally it's probably the best idea to avoid this as well. Obviously, you don't want your students to do any recording as well, or taking screenshots or anything like that as well. When it comes to recording your videos, I think you can obviously, you know, you can cut out your students from that if you want to record a demo lesson or a lecture. You can put that online, but make sure that you don't include any of your students on that as well. Okay. We should also mention something about bullying and online behavior. So, unfortunately, cyberbullying is becoming more and more prevalent these days, and something that we have to be mindful of, especially with our younger learners. So it can be very, very distressing. And this kind of bullying is just as bad as any other kind of bullying in the classroom or the playground. Um, Even worse in some respects because it can be anonymous and it's not easy to escape from online bullying. or getting messages or unwanted things online. So just be mindful of that. Work very closely with your students, and guide them and remind them of the behaviours that you want to see. Set the ground rules as well. Um, Classroom management and behaviour management are just as important for online lessons as they are in the classroom. Okay, let's say something about creating a routine. Okay, so I think it's a good idea to do your best to develop a routine in your online classroom, and this can help the students feel really safe as well. Um, and it keeps things much easier to organise in the long run. You want to give the students a really nice, safe, and nurturing environment. Um, Make sure that you can give your instructions very clearly and easily, efficiently. Um, Make sure that your instructions are very mm, kind of understandable. You don't have to spend too much time. Give a demo if possible. Um, a good way to organize your routine is to make to have a kind of the way that you open your class, for example, to have a warmer in every lesson, in the first part of your lesson. You can state your objectives. You can have the kind of rituals in the beginning and the ends of your lesson. If you're teaching young learners, you might have a kind of what are we learning today routine. So you can signpost things that are coming up in the lesson. At the end of the lesson, you might want to summarize what you've been learning as well during that session. You might have a set time for giving homework and so on. There might be a set time for having a bit of a more of an interactive game or quiz activity at the end of your lesson. There might be certain times where you ask for comments, for example, or go to breakout rooms and so on. So I think if you've got a structure, it makes your planning much easier as well. Okay. So I think it's good to have this mix. If you've got periods where you've got to focus on grammar and language, and then you've got other kind of less demanding periods in your lesson, have mini breaks. You can have the students share their screens, and they can be the focus of attention if they're doing a speaking exercise, for example. So have a think about how you structure your lessons and what kind of routine that you've got. Okay, let's mention something about instructions. So giving instructions is really important. Of course, it's very important in the classroom, giving and checking your instructions, either verbally or written instructions. Online teaching actually lets you deliver instructions both verbally and in writing. So you can put them up on the screen nice and clearly. You can answer any questions you've got before setting a task. You can ask your students to confirm that they understand the the instructions in the chat box, for example. And unlike in a physical class, every student can do this at the same time. And this is the one of the benefits of working online, because you can get simultaneous feedback from your students. You don't have to go around nominating all of your students. Your students can do that really quickly. Okay. Also, you can share materials and links while you're giving your instructions, depending on what platform you're using. You can share documents as well. You can put your instructions on the documents on your shared screen, especially when you're doing kind of more interactive materials using the platforms that we mentioned earlier. For example, Quizlet. You might want to give a kind of written instruction to go along with that, and then check your instructions as well. So I mentioned classroom management. So in some respects it's quite easy to manage your classrooms online, more so than in a physical class. So you can set your ground rules, you can manage chatting, you're able to mute students, um, and it's less likely that you'll be interrupted by students kind of whispering at the back of the class, and kind of passing notes around and giggling and being distracted, because you've got their attention much more than in the classroom. They're looking at you on the screen, and hopefully there'll be less distractions around them. You can have students mute their microphones, but let them know why you're asking them to mute. If you've got something important to share with them, you can mute them, or ask them to mute themselves, so you've got their attention, and that you are the center of focus if you need to be. And this is great. Obviously, there's no option to mute people in the real world. I wish there was sometimes. Um, but this is one of the tools that we've got for online. Of course, we've got the chat as well. We've got questions. We can highlight um, any queries that we've got. We can share those with the rest of the students. The good thing about the chat box as well in Zoom, for example, and other platforms, is that you can isolate and only chat to one person if you want to, rather than the whole group. So if you've got instructions for one student, you can do that publicly or privately, so they feel comfortable, and you can support them throughout the lessons. Okay, so don't forget about the chat. It's a very, very powerful tool, and sometimes it gets overlooked for online teaching. Let's talk about student engagement. Okay, so it can be, although we've got their attention, it can be hard to kind of focus for a long time on the screen, especially for younger learners. So it's good to, as I said, have a mixture and different pace of activities and different types of interaction during your lesson. So you might want to have a break from being on the webcam, for example. You might want to use different types of materials, share screens, share video from time to time, and have that variety on the screen. Um, you'll need to kind of be a bit larger than life, because don't have the ability to walk around and be present in the classroom. So you need to kind of exaggerate your expressions, your tone of voice, um, keep your students interested. But obviously, don't overdo it if you can possibly do that. But try to keep the engagement going. You can actually keep students on their toes as well. You can nominate students as well, just as you can in the actual physical classroom. You can use these online tools. You can randomize answers and nominations with online tools like a spinner or a dice, or sound effects, um, and soundboards and things like this. It's a lot of fun sometimes, and you can have applause and cheers in the classroom. You can have buzzer sounds, alarms, and a whole range of different sounds as well. Okay, um, and also, don't be afraid of the silence. Just as it's true in the classroom, students sometimes need a bit of time to formulate their answers and think about what you're asking them to do. So don't be afraid of the silence. Um, of course, if no answers are forthcoming, if you're trying to elicit something, um, don't labour the point. Don't wait for an answer if you feel that none is coming. Of course, but I think, don't be afraid of a little bit of silence in your class. I think. Um, just because there's periods of silence in the classroom, it doesn't mean that any learning is not taking place. Okay, so I think what we do, we go to a Q&A session, but I just want to summarize what we've learned today. So let's just quickly summarize. So we talked about the big increase in teaching online. A lot of that was to do with COVID, but definitely it's growing and growing, and there's room for everybody. Um, Different options to work for a company or work for yourself. There are pros and cons on each side. Working for a company is more stable. They help with the marketing, but of course, if you work for yourself, you can set your own rates, but you'll have to do a lot more admin, of course, with that. So things to consider: time zones, visas, cost of living, and connectivity in your country of choice, your destination. Um, Thinking about online tools and platforms to use. So my advice is to experiment, try different ones, try to use different tools and see what works for you. Get feedback from your students, which ones are more popular, for example. Think about the equipment that you use. Make sure that you've got a really nice, safe, secure, fast internet connection. Um, Make sure that you've got a really nice camera and headphone setup, and you've got a nice professional looking background in a comfortable setting. So think about online privacy and safety. So we talked about GDPR, protecting the data, your own data and the data of your students, protecting against any material, photos and video online, and protecting your students from bullying and antisocial online behavior. We talked about creating a routine. So this helps keeping students safe. It makes your life a lot easier when it comes to setting up your instructions and your lesson, and having a structure in your lesson um, to make things go much more smoothly. And how to go about delivering and checking your instructions when working online. So, online using mute and so on, using the chat box, sharing materials, and going into breakout rooms and so on. We can cut down on the chatting and use the tools at our disposal, and we can get very spontaneous, um, instantaneous feedback as well. We need to engage our students as well. We can do that by using a whole range of different tools. We can randomize um, interactions and nominations, but we can also embrace silence when we need to as well. Okay, so let's go to a Q&A session. If you've got any questions, now's the time. So let's have a look. Here's a question from Clinton. From your experience, what level or age group would be considered an ideal level to start online teaching for a new teacher? That's a very good question, Clinton. Thank you very much. Um, well, I think it really depends. Some people will be much more comfortable teaching adults in the beginning, um, where obviously the attention span is greater and the motivation is higher. But other people might be much more comfortable teaching children. They might have had experience working with children before. So I think you have to think about what works for you. When you're just starting out, I think it's important to think about what your preferences are as well, um, because at the end of the day, you need to be happy and motivated to teach in for yourself as well. Um, of course, you know that the to keep your options open, it's good to develop a range of experiences so you can teach young and old students different levels, for example. Um, when it comes to levels, I think for online teaching and face-to-face teaching, it can be difficult to go straight in with lower level students because you need to think about grading your language appropriately, using appropriate materials, and so on. And it can be very difficult in the beginning because the natural tendency is to use natural language, but with lower level students, this could be a bit of a problem sometimes. So, Clinton, have a think about it. Which age group and which level would you like to teach? When you choose to work for a company, do they have preferred platforms for use typically? Um, yeah, I think you'll find that companies have their platform of choice. They've probably invested a bit of money into that as well. That might be Zoom or kind of very bespoke platform that they have just for that company. They might have specially designed it for exactly how they want to deliver their online lessons. So yeah, I think generally companies do have preferred platforms, and you'll have to use the one that they specify quite a lot of the time. There, it's a good question. And also, question about companies: do they provide the curriculum? Um, I think on the whole, I think companies do provide a not maybe not necessarily curriculum, but they've got a syllabus for you to work from, or at least a kind of loose curriculum or syllabus that you can add your own materials to. Some companies are very rigid. They'll have, this is what you're going to be teaching, and you're not don't have that much freedom to deviate from your lesson plan. Companies already have presentations ready for you, and there's not much scope for you to change that. Whereas other companies might just be simply providing you with students, and then it's up to you to use what materials you want to. So I think there's a lot of variation out there. The thing is to do your research and find out as much as you can about the companies that you potentially want to work for. Ask questions at interview stage. If you remember the session that I gave about mm, finding work, and asking questions at interview, this is the one of the things to ask potential companies. So, being a new teacher when working for a company, would you have a choice of the level of student you get to teach? Yeah, well, I think again, there's such a variation out there. I think when it comes to new teachers, that if you communicate well with the company and let them know that maybe you don't have experience for teaching certain levels, I think that might be the way to go. Although this might restrict you in the beginning of how many students you can get potentially, you can build up your confidence. Um, but they might simply say, this week you're teaching pre-intermediate, next week you're teaching advanced learners. So it really depends. And if you want to kind of build up a good relationship with a company, I think it's worthwhile being open to teaching different levels. That would be my advice there. Again, it depends on the company. Ask questions at interview stage. Have you got a choice of teaching the level or even age group? It's a very good question. Thank you. If you work for a company, do they get students for you? I sound like a broken record here a little, but it really depends on the company. Some companies uh, do everything um, to market and get students, and they just provide the teacher. Um, I think if you're working for a company, it's very unlikely that you're going to have to go out there and find your own students. They provide the students for you. The difference might be if you're working for some of these platforms that we mentioned before, where mm, you kind of might be you might list yourself on the platform, but you'll still have to provide a little bit of marketing for yourself, make a video, um, upload that video, and then the students kind of choose you. So I think it does depend. Do your research as always, is my advice. Gary's asking about rates. What are some of the standard rates that you can charge if you're independent? Huh, a standard rate. I don't think there is such a thing as a standard rate, Gary. Um, do you set the rates if you work for a company? Um, yeah, I think if you're working for a company, the rate is the rate. If you're working and listing yourself on a platform, I think you've got a certain amount of scope to choose your own rates. If you're working independently, you choose the rate. You choose to value yourself, your time, however you want to. Um, have a think about your qualifications, your experience. Don't sell yourself short, Gary. Um, your time is valuable. Um, and I don't think there is a standard fee because everyone is different. I think when you're starting out, obviously you want to place yourself competitively against the market. So not to kind of price yourself out of the market and be too expensive. Remember though, if you set your bar too low in the beginning, it's very difficult to raise your prices after that. So have a good think about what you think your value is per hour or per lesson, and then stick with that, and think about what value you're providing to the students. Um, I wouldn't say a number. I wouldn't like to pull a number out of the air because everyone is different, Gary. I hope that helps. Excuse me. Can I suggest authentic materials for students while teaching online? And what types of novels are authentic and which ones are not? Okay, that's a really, really nice question. Of course, you can suggest authentic materials. Check out my webinar about authentic materials as well. Um, yeah, absolutely. Just because you're teaching online doesn't mean that you can't use authentic materials. um, what types of novels are authentic materials? All novels are authentic materials because they're not designed for non-native speakers. They're not designed for the use in the classroom. So, War and Peace. War and Peace is an authentic novel. Harry Potter is an authentic novel. Um, I don't think there's such a thing as an inauthentic novel because they're works of fiction. Um, but you can, if you're talking about things like readers are slightly different. Readers are authentic material that's been mm, edited or manipulated or altered in some way for consumption by a student. So, in some ways, a reader of a novel is kind of semi authentic. We can call it like that. But yeah, but absolutely use authentic material. It's great. Some really great questions. I hope that I'm trying to get through as many as I can because time is limited now. Um, if independent, is there a maximum number of students to keep in mind? Oh, that's a great question. So I think if you're in a group, if you're talking about a group environment, um, if it's a lesson, I would keep it a kind of around the 10, 12 students to a lesson so that you don't spread your attention too thinly, and you can give every student a bit of time that they need. If it's a webinar, of course, it's unlimited. If you're giving a lecture, for example, a presentation, you can that can be a live stream like today, for example. It's unlimited. Um, of course, you might want to teach one-to-one or in small groups of 2 or 3 students, for example. But if you're talking about how many students to have on your roster, for example, you have to think about the time you're available. If you want to work every day, you can teach 2, 3, or 4 students every day, for example. So you could have up to 20, 25, 30, even 30 students if you're lucky. If you've got 25 or 30 students on your books, then you're doing very, very well. But uh, it all depends on your availability and your timetable, I think. Okay, so many questions. Let's see. There's a question about thank you very much, by the way. I wanted to ask, where can a non-native teacher find jobs better? What skills are essential for non-natives? I think the skills for natives and non-native teachers are the same. To have a very good understanding of your material, the language you're teaching, have a good rapport with your students, be well organized, and make entertaining and informative lessons for your students, whether you're native or not. In terms of looking for work, yeah, the usual places. A TEFL Academy website is a good place to start. TEFL.com. You could look on teaching platforms that are out there as well. So, I'd like to say that these days it's more and more. Have an equal playing field for native and non-native teachers. But yeah, have a look what's out there, and the skills are universal, I would say. Let's see. I'm trying to answer a few different questions before we leave. Here's a question about assessing level. How would you initially assess the level of a student, particularly if teaching independently? Are there particular resources for this? Well, there's lots of online diagnostic tests and placement tests out there, from Cambridge University and other places as well. A lot of the student textbooks from Oxford and Cambridge University Press and other um, student books and teacher books would have a placement test built into the curriculum as well. You can find them online, and you can find um, specific ones for every level, for example, or a rough level. And you've got diagnostic ones that can kind of give you a rough idea. Level placement is more just as much an art as it is a science. So you can do a paper test, and someone can be, um, for example, B1, which is an intermediate learner, but then their speaking might be very poor. So you need to take that into consideration. Skills, they might be very good at grammar, but their vocabulary is very low, for example. So, so level placement can give you a good starting place, but you need to continuously assess the level of your students and make it more challenging or less challenging, as the case may be as you go along. But it's a really good question. Okay, I think we've got room for maybe just 1 or 2 more questions now. I'm sorry that I can't get to all of your questions. If you notice the students dislike the breakout rooms and get no work done there, is there an alternative way to do group work online? If I've only ever seen breakout rooms, so wondering. That's a very, very good question. Is an alternative to do group work online? Hmm. Yeah, I think that's tricky without using the breakout rooms, unless your students are in the same room or in the same location. They might be tricky to do that, to do group work. You might ask them to kind of go away from the platform and and use it a kind of third party platform for them to do some group work or project work, and then you can come back to the platform once they've done that. So, for example, you might be using Zoom and you might say, okay, let's have a 5 minute break, everybody. I want you to go away and talk to your partner um, on Zoom, on Skype, or FaceTime them or something like that, or on Google Chat or whatever it might be, and then come back later, and then we'll come back together to our Zoom platform. I've never tried it that way before, but it might work if you're not a fan of breakout rooms. Good question. Okay, I think we've just run out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a really great session today. Thanks very much, everybody. Before we leave, I'd just like you to give me some feedback about our mm, our webinars, and I'm going to put a link in the chat for you. And if you'd be so kind to give us some feedback by going to the survey, and hopefully it's been useful for you today. And whatever you're doing today, have a great day. And if you're planning to teach online, I'm sure that you'll enjoy that. And I hope to join you again very soon. Okay, but from me today, before my voice gives out again, I'm going to say a warm farewell and take care, everybody. Thank you very much.